Hey there, you are listening to the Eugene Debs Music Experience Radio Hour, the sound of curiosity.
I'm Adrian Cervantes, an intermedia artist and cellist in the Eugene Difficult Music Ensemble, also known as EDME.
I'm Lee Pembleton, EDME's administrative assistant. We are a new music ensemble based in Eugene, Oregon, USA, Earth. Every other week here on The Sound of Curiosity, we chat with a new music composer or group and listen to their music.
Our mission in EDME is to perform underrepresented works of new music and to commission new music from traditionally underrepresented composers in order to open ears and minds. We work to expand the definition of what music can be and what music is capable of achieving, as well as who is capable of achieving it.
Our executive director, J.P. Lemke, defines new music as
new music is a catch-all term for sounds that are composer-driven, encompassing experimental, improvised, electronic chamber, and symphonic music. It is contemporary classical, but without the inherent contradiction embedded in that phrase.
This show is brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. If you would like to support what we do, join us at patreon.com/EDMensemble.
Today, we hear part one of our interview with composer Fani Kosona. We will kick off the show with Etude Topologique 1, Light, performed by EDME. Prepare to be inspired. What we wanted to hear about today is your musical journey and how it is you came to being a composer. When
To
did you start composing?
Right.
When did you know it was your passion?
You know, I I was a shy type, so even though I had a classical training since the age of 6, and I was playing piano since a little child, actually, uh, I was hiding my first efforts to make, my first pieces of music. I was even writing down some things, but then I threw them away, and I felt that, I felt intimidated, maybe because of the standard training, in the academic style that I had in my early years. So then I followed the whole path, and actually I didn't even know that I was going to be a musician one day, because I was imagining in my adolescence, for instance, I was imagining that I would become a mathematician or maybe an astronomer. I had a passion about mathematics. And then I got into the university and I studied mathematics, but I was following normally my path, my studies in piano and theory and, and all that stuff. And still, I kept hiding my compositions and my creative efforts, and I was very intimidated about that until the time that a friend proposed me to participate in a rock group with him and some other friends. And then, in that environment, I felt, and with the encouragement of my friends, I felt better and I started trying, little by little. Uh, well, still, many years after, I pursued my studies and I went to Paris and I was studying in the Paris Conservatory, advanced theory things like counterpoint and fugue and all that academic stuff. And yeah, and deep down, I knew that I wanted to write my music, but I suppose that I was thinking about, let's say that it should be very important to have a full training, a very high level training, and then just there to pronounce your creation to the world. I was shy. That's the truth. uh, but well, in that let's say in that path, when I reached the end of all those studies, I said to myself, near my 30s now, I was something like 20, 28, 29, and still throwing away all my stuff and not showing anything to anybody. But I just finished my studies and I said to myself, well, it's now or never, and maybe you must decide. In the meantime, I had decided that I wanted to be a musician and not a mathematician. Even though I studied mathematics and all that. So it just came not very easy for me and not very rapidly, let's say. It took a long time. So let's say that in the beginning, my early age, my childhood was more restricted, and maybe I'm now having my childhood and experimenting in a free, way, and I feel free to express myself and maybe take risks and go for something unknown. And yeah, you understand, because I think that experimental music is the ultimate, let's say, tool for creation. Exactly for that reason, because it made me feel that I was liberated from all this academic, let's say, oppression to just feel that I was never trained enough, and maybe I was not so, important, and everything has been already said, and what's there for me to say? All these kind of questions that now I realize, of course, everybody has. Finding my freedom after a lot of classical training was a hard path. And I found it little by little with a lot of effort, let's say that.
Mhm. So the early compositions that you were throwing away were more traditional?
Yes, maybe they were more traditional because actually I just became acquainted with new music and contemporary music in the 90s when I was studying music in Paris.
Mhm.
There, I first went to concerts and heard the music of Xenakis and Pierre Boulez and Stockhausen, and maybe even at that time in the 90s, there was already a lot of music by Gérard Griset and Tristan Muraille, spectral composers, I mean, and all that stuff. So I just found out about this music at that time in the 90s, and I was in my 20s, let's say. Uh, so, yeah, from that point, it took me some time to, let's say, digest this new material and understand what it was. Of course, I was, I must say that I was thrilled about this music, even though I couldn't understand very well in the beginning what it is about. Uh, but um, I'm sure that inside me there was always burning, this kind of urge to find out new things and go for the unknown. So this kind of music seemed to me like a first glimpse of that in some way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did did the mathematics always have an influence on works you were composing? Like, were those two always, if not integrated as much as they are now, influencing each other?
Yes, I think they are influencing each other because I have been always a very structural type. Most of my ideas, when I'm starting to compose something, are structural, and then I try to find the content. I first find the form. Well, if we can speak about form, you know what I mean. That's why I say structure. First, I decide about the form, and then I start, clearing my ideas about the content and the textures and the micro, let's say, material that I am going to use. So in
Mhm.
that aspect, you can say that my thought is very mathematical.
We just heard Fani Kosona's composition Etude Topologique 2, Magma, performed by Ensemble Rev Ohm.
Do you have a specific process for most of your composing? Kind of, you start with the structure and then extrapolate that out. You know, is there a process that kind of unites what you do now? For when it comes to composing, for instance, Etude Topologique,
Mhm.
how does that get written? Could you walk us through that the process of composing that?
Well, it's interesting. The question you did now, it's interesting about the etude topologique, because that it's of course there's a lot of course of mathematics in that work, but the beginning was not structural for one time. Actually, the beginning of the beginning of my thought for etude topologique was the result of a conversation that I had with a friend and a colleague, a double bassist, George Kokinaris. It's a good friend of mine, and he was the first, let's say, catalyst for me to begin this work, because he told me that, well, he told me, Fanny, why don't you write a piece with an open instrumentation, because I'm going to, let's say, I'm trying to sort it out with some people and maybe make an ensemble and do something. And I would love to do something by you and all that. So, but I'm not sure. I can't be sure if all these people will be coordinated and available at the same time and all that stuff. So he said, if you could do something with open instrumentation, it would be very practical. And so I started thinking about, most of my music is not experimental in the sense of open scores and graphic scores and stuff like that. I've done very few graphic scores and open scores. Maybe Etude Topologique is my most serious kind of score from this category. So I said to myself, how am I going to do something for open instrumentation? Um, uh, and trying to resolve this problem, I thought about these four categories of sonorities that I use in the piece, and um, so the four categories are multiphonics and overbowing and what else was it? Transparent sounds. This is not a very, let's say, official category, but we all understand what it is. And what was the fourth? I don't even remember now. Uh, anyway, and I said to myself that not all the instruments have, for instance, overbowing, because they don't all have a bow. They don't use a bow. But what am I going to do if I write some kind of articulation or some kind of, let's say, um, texture that needs a bow? What am I going to do with another instrument that doesn't have a bow? And well, not to take too long for that, I can say that finally I decided to make a topological structure and have four topological spaces of sonorities with certain characteristics, and then make, let's say, something that has mostly, well, that make a work that has an identity. How can I say that? I think I was writing something about that earlier. Yeah, let's say it's an indeterminate work, but it has a precise sonic identity. And that's because there is this topological kind of thought behind it. So even though instruments change, the sonic identity remains the same. And that's a way that I found to treat the problem, let's say, the problem of practical issues that my friend had. That's about it. So in this sense, I created four topological spaces with sonorities which are common for all instruments. And these spaces actually, the way I treat them, I treat them in the score, they, let's say, acquire certain properties which are considered good in mathematics. And of course, at the same time, they function well in music, structurally well, like,
Mhm.
the spaces are um, coherent, they are continuous, let's say, they become measurable in some ways, so you can have a clear perception of the result that you're going to get. And even if you try that and maybe compare two different recordings of the work, you will see that actually, yes, there is a precise sonic identity, in spite of the fact that you have different instruments. And I even tested once in a concert if I can recognize my own work. So there was a concert where my études topologiques were included, where the ensemble didn't make breaks between the pieces. They played with fade-ins and fade-outs one after the other. And I knew, let's say, the order of the pieces, but I didn't know where the piece of another would end and mine would begin. And I was positively surprised to see that I could understand when my piece began. That was very important to me. That's
Yeah.
about.
Um, yeah, our pianist JP, who you've talked to via email a lot, um, was actually being interviewed yesterday and talking about graphic scores and how that's like they're not as abstract as people would think. That a lot of the graphic scores we play, even with different instrumentation or different members playing it, they have a coherent sound because they're interpreted consistently. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely right. Sometimes we are misled to think that this is maybe very, very free and very, I don't know, very indeterminate. But actually, especially graphic scores, verbal scores less, but graphic scores already you have. I mean, you have a graphic representation which is purely mathematical thing. So yes, of course, it gets a precise identity by that.
Yeah, so etude topologique is an exception. Is there for other scores? Is there a process like you usually start in the same place or not? Would you say you have like a consistent way of composing?
No, I wouldn't say that because I
Okay.
don't like routine. I'm not a routine person. I, let's say, experiment with something. Actually, now I realize that when you put this question, I realize that I'm uh, a very experimental personality inside. Authentically in some way. Because if I experiment with something one time, then I don't want to go back and repeat the same. Every time I try to do something new and let's say have something a new question to answer, a new problem to face, new answers to give. And well, I have some standards, of course. Like I say that I'm working with the idea of topological design. This is my term. Let's say that's the way I call it. So what is this? This is, let's say, a kind of thinking that has to do with what kind of transformations you can get from your idea. So let's say, what was this is about what was called in the past the development, and it was mostly motivic things and these standard procedures used to develop the material in a composition in tradition. But I'm trying to see that, in an advanced way. So, for instance, you can get almost anything from everything, uh, actually. I mean, you can have a pedal note, and then the way that you are going to understand it as a topological object um, can give any result. For instance, you can, from a pedal note, you can get, let's say, a trill, and then something that vibrates in a wider way, and then maybe this is going to be something that goes from one extreme of the register to the other, and then this would have all come from a pedal note. In another let's say topological path, you could take this pedal note and maybe cut it into small pieces, and let's say process it in terms of rhythm, and have very small durations, and maybe then work on the way that you cut the durations, like having equal durations or not equal, symmetry or asymmetries, and then everything again. And
Mm.
this is kind of the way, let's say, I think, speaking about topological design, but as you see, it's a very wide range it's a very ample methodological tool, so I can do whatever interests me every time, and it's not a routine,
Mhm.
but a way of thinking that renews itself every time.
When does that develop in your compositional history? Like when do you reach that place, that degree of confidence where you can give yourself such an open canvas, if it were, or that where you can do anything? Because it sounds like when you started out, there was a lot less confidence.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. You're right.
how do you how what pieces got you to that place? How did you get there?
Well, I was lucky to have a teacher in composition and mentor, Theodore Antoniou. He's not alive anymore. He passed away in 2018. Anyway, Theodore helped me a lot to um, to feel this confidence that you're talking about, because first of all, he believed in me. Second, this is going to be maybe a little funny, but anyway, he and I were totally different. He favored the narrative element in composition, um, and I was, as I said, completely a structural type. So we had really a huge distance in our ways of thinking. But he always believed in me in spite of that. And, through not only our lessons, but also our discussions, uh, and our exchange, philosophical and existential exchange, I felt more certain about myself, and he also gave me a lot of opportunities to hear my music. He conducted my music often. He did things for me. He was very generous to me. So, having the opportunity to experiment like that and see what's my music about, and maybe have a clearer view of the result. Um, I slowly got into this idea of leaving behind my former self, who wanted to have everything perfect, and after reaching perfection, only then uh, showing the result to to
Mm.
the world, you know. He made me see things through action, being active, um, trying things, experimenting, and not being afraid to, let's say, even fail, because even what we call failure, um, is a very important opportunity to get feedback and understand things and come back with more insight and go further the next time. So yeah, that was one thing, and then maybe later another friend of mine, Alexis Porphyriadis, who is a composer of experimental music, and he does mostly graphic and verbal scores. Uh, he helped me um, into my first steps in experimental music. We played together in an ensemble. I was attending at first one of his seminars, and then I took all this information, and because I'm a music teacher, also I tried to work with my students on open scores and graphic and verbal scores, and then that was my second, let's say, step to liberation and confidence, because with my students who were, uh, unspecialized people in their first steps, I encouraged them to not do like me, and try things and not be afraid, and learn by experiment and learn by doing things and not thinking only. So among with my students, I, let's say, advanced for myself too. That was yeah, that was the second step up to more confidence, and yeah, and more action anyway.
To close out the show, we will hear Fani Kosona's narrative, two from three narratives, performed by Agiro Sierra Evans. To hear more of Fani's work, tune in to the next episode of The Sound of Curiosity or visit fanikosona.wordpress.com. That is FANIKOSONA.WORDPRESS.com.
To learn more about or hear more by EDME, you can visit us at edmensemble.org or visit our Bandcamp at edme.bandcamp.com. You can also support us through Patreon, Venmo, or PayPal, username EDM Ensemble. And you can email us at edmensemble@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our supporters: Austin Rich, Cassidy Wagner, Derek Atlansky, Justin Ambron, Janet Stott and Arthur Pembleton, Zane Writings, Less Than One Network, Insta Ballet, Beware the Radio, Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Community Foundation, Eugene Cultural Services, Chad Scarborough, Mary and David Lemke, and so many more. Thank you for listening and supporting new music. Your curiosity makes this possible.